Brilliance Audio presents Dallas, 63, The First Deep State Revolt Against the White House by Peter Dale Scott. Performed by George Spelvin. Two kinds of power can be discerned at work in the Byzantine processes of American politics. In The American Deep State, I used two terms from Hannah Arendt, following Thucydides, to describe them. Persuasion through arguments, theathane, versus coercion by force and violence, bia. In another essay, Arendt wrote that only the former was true power. Violence and power, that is, persuasive power, are not the same. Power and violence are opposites. Where the one rules absolutely, the other is absent. One can add that a persuasive politics is one of openness, whereas a violent politics is usually shrouded in exclusion and secrecy. The distinction is both extremely important and hard to define precisely. A number of other opposing terms can be used that are roughly but not exactly coterminous. Arendt herself also writes of top-down and bottom-up power. Others of egalitarian or democratic versus oppressive power. It is clear that top-down power is not always violent, just as democratic power is not always nonviolent. However, the terms persuasive, bottom-up, and democratic, even if not synonymous or exactly coterminous, help us to focus on a Socratic ideal of influence by persuasion that has, through the centuries, been a lodestar of Western civilization. By contrast, their opposites, violence, top-down, repressive, epitomize what I believe civilization should be moving away from. These dyadic alternatives represent not just alternative ideologies and lifestyles, but also divisions in most large-scale societies and bureaucracies. Here we find agencies like the U.S. State Department, whose stated aim is diplomatic persuasion, and other agencies like the Pentagon, whose business, ultimately, is violence. In America always, but particularly in the Kennedy era, we have seen occasional confrontations between the two tendencies on both the bureaucratic and also the popular levels. Witness the wrangles over the meaning and application of the Second Amendment. In this book, I would also like to paraphrase Arendt's contrast between power and violence by using two common terms with a common Greek origin. True power unites, consolidates a society through dialogue. Violence divides a society through the dialectics inherent in violence. For whereas power tends to resolve and reduce social tensions through persuasion, violence tends to perpetuate them by creating resentment and opposition. As authors from Aeschylus to Jacques Ellul have written, violence creates violence. The dialectical response may be delayed for centuries, as in pre-revolutionary France or Tsarist Russia, but violence can create social divisions that are very difficult to resolve or dissipate. America is an outstanding exemplar of both forces. The product of a revolution proclaiming equality, it is still living with the violent consequences of slavery. In foreign policy since World War II, American foreign policy has witnessed the interplay of two opposing strategies toward the Soviet Union: coexistence through persuasive diplomacy at the United Nations versus military dominance disguised by the code phrase, peace through strength. The title of a policy book by statesman financier Bernard Baruch in 1952, Peace Through Strength, was a slogan used by Ronald Reagan and by Republican platforms since to describe an overt strategy of global domination and American hegemony. It was used to proclaim the official end of an earlier U.S. foreign policy dating from the end of the Eisenhower administration to the beginning of Jimmy Carter's, a policy of détente. But the Pax Americana in the post-Reagan era of U.S. hegemony has not been peaceful at all. Quite the reverse. As former U.S. Army officer Andrew Basovich has commented, belief in the efficacy of military power almost inevitably breeds the temptation to put that power to work. Peace through strength easily becomes peace through war. In my last chapter, I compare the last years of the Pax Americana today to the last years of the Pax Britannica in the late 19th century, when hubristic overreaching led dialectically to a series of minor conflicts, followed by a world war.